welcome back. My name's Nick, and this is going to be part 4 of my ae86 Respray series. And to start this video off, we're just putting the car in the spray booth here, and I'm currently backing it in there, and I ended up changing my mind afterwards and driving the car in straight, just because I thought it would work a bit better for the way the booth is set up. I put the front of the car closer towards the extraction fan. As you can see there in the background, it's got a bit of space between the fan and the panels that I'm spraying, so I didn't want to be right up hard against it. And plus, doing it this way, I'm going to have a bit more space to walk around the back of the car, have my little table set up. The front of the car isn't going to get touched at all. So yeah, just going through the masking stage here, getting everything sealed up, knowing full well from the spraying the interior that masking is going to take a bloody long time. So this was the afternoon before I sprayed it. Decided to take my time, make sure I mask it up real nice, and the next morning is when I got up and did my final wax and grease remover, blew it all out with the airline and started spraying. So yeah, this video here we're going to be spraying a high build primer. The primer I'm using is like a sandable primer, so it's going to go on quite thick. I believe I ended up doing 3 coats in the end. I didn't film every single coat just because I only had the one GoPro battery, but the idea is you spray the primer on there, you sand it all back once it's all dry, and you can get all these panels perfectly flat, because as you can see there, the different colors and everything in the paint, where it's I've cut through in some places and some places are not quite cut through. If I just sprayed over that, you'd probably see slight imperfections when I finally do the clear coat. So the idea of the filler primer is fill it all in and then rub it all back completely flat. I ended up rubbing it all back with a 400 and then a 600 grit. Being a white paint, it's just a solid white, so you don't need to be too aggressive with the grits. Well, what I mean by that is you can be very aggressive with the grit. If you end up using a silver or a black paint, you need to finish with minimum 800 grit, because you will see the sanding scratches, and like the silver flecks in a metallic will sit in the sanding scratches and they'll look funny. You'll be able to see like the dark lines where the scratches are, where the metallic is sitting in them. Or if it's a black, you will just flat out see lines, like scratch lines. But luckily with white, you can get away with a 400 grit. I just went 600 grit just to be safe. And the idea behind not going all the way to like an 800 or a 1000 grit is because you're going to have a much better mechanical bond if you sand it back with like a coarser grit sandpaper. So yeah, I ended up just using some wax and grease remover, blew everything out with the airline like I said, and wiped the whole car right down with wax and grease remover, get it ready. And I think the car looks awesome at this stage when it's all masked up beautifully. This is the final time we're going to see it in this base coat, or the factory base coat / primer. And I think it looks awesome. Everything's super clean and just ready to get sprayed. So mixed up my primer. I didn't do too much because I wasn't sure how much I was going to use. And got some thinners in my primer gun and just started spraying some thinners through the gun and playing with the air pressure settings. I've got a little air pressure regulator there on the handle. And what you're looking for here is you want the gun to spray like a nice even fan. When you can see at the start where I start spraying here, the fan is concentrated to the top and the bottom, which means the pressure's too high. You want to turn your pressure right down. Yeah, it's hard to tell in the video, but I think I ended up being around that 20 psi mark. But I wasn't too stressed about getting it perfect with just the thinners. So I kind of ran out toward the end there, and I just thought the gun's going to spray you differently with a thick primer in there than it will with the thinners. So the rule of thumb here is obviously you want your fan to look nice and clean, just like the thinners did. But what I like to do is spray up against the piece of the masking, and what you're looking for is like a nice even squashed football. That's kind of what I got here. It's that kind of like an egg shape, but real thin style egg shape. That's my settings there. That's how I like to spray. The fan is set to full fan. I set my fluid out all the way so I get as much fluid as I can. And all I really play with is the settings. If I do find that I get runs or I struggle with anything, that's when I start playing with the fluid needle, and I wind that in to try to get a little less product in there. And if I ever need to spray anywhere tight, I will bring that fan in, so I'll reduce that fan right down. But whenever you do that, you also need to adjust your settings again, bring your fluid right in, and your pressure is going to be directed into a one spot, so you want to bring the pressure right down too. So depending on what you're spraying and how you're doing it, you're going to want to change your settings constantly. But for this job here, the way I did it was I set up the gun to paint the way I want it to, and I could paint this whole body, which is a pretty simple body to paint really. I was able to paint the whole body in the full fan, around about that 20 psi full. Fluid was wound all the way out, and I ended up getting quite a good finish out of this gun. After I finished spraying the primer, I do end up talking about the gun. It's a De Vilbius GTI Pro Light that I got secondhand, just nice and cheap. I got it from an ex-painter, like an ex-spray painter, and I just bought the PRI fluid needle and air cap, and I just use it now for my primer gun. And it ends up saving me an awful lot of time, because the cheap primer gun that I had before used to leave really horrible textures and ended up making a lot more work in the end for me. So spending a little bit of extra money on a good gun has definitely saved me a lot of time, a lot of sandpaper, a lot of time sanding. So yeah, very happy with it, happy with how it laid out. And also I'm using quite a high quality primer too, so this primer sands very well. It actually goes on quite dark, and when you start sanding it, you can see where the high spots are. The high spots go light when you start sanding this primer. This is a De Beer primer. I don't remember the exact code of the paint, but like, remember being quite impressed with how it sanded. Being a sandable high build primer, you'd expect it to sand well. So as you can see here, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to find my feet. I'm trying to work out how I'm going to map my way around the car and trying to really get into the groove of spray painting. This is not something that I do all, day in, day out. It's not my full-time job as a painter. So sort of learning on the go. But I figured that if I could work out how exactly I want to paint the car in primer, map my way around the car, and also come up with a good technique, then it's going to be good practice for the main event when I go to move on to doing clear over base. So I did learn a lot throughout this primer stage, just trying to work out where I want to start, how I want to finish, mapping my way around the car, jumping to and from different areas to keep a wet edge and not really get dry spray. But yeah, so you can definitely see my skills progress as the paint job goes on. And one thing that I haven't mentioned yet was that I brought the boot in and leant it up against the front of the car there, just to put a bit of primer on the edge that I'd separated. So in a previous video, I ended up separating the seams on the top and the bottom of that boot and just clearing out as much rust as I could out of there as possible. And when I did close those seams back up, there was a slight ripple to that bottom edge of the boot. The top edge wasn't so bad, but it was mainly the bottom one. And the ripple was only so slight that it didn't really warrant using body filler to try to repair it. It just needed a little bit of smoothing out. So I figured bringing it in while I was doing this primer, while I had the primer mixed up, I would just do a few coats over that ripply section, and that'd be enough just to smooth it out with a bit of sandpaper. And then in the future, what I ended up doing was bringing the boot in with all the body panels and did the boot along with the body panels, so that it got a full coat of primer and it was completely flat before I started priming it, and then obviously sanded it all back smooth before I did the clear over base. But that's the reasoning behind having the boot there. It was just to fix that little tiny bit of a ripple that I had, but it ended up working just fine. I was quite happy with how it turned out, and yeah, that's how I did it. Now, as I said earlier, spraying this car was a really big learning curve for me. So like I said, I was trying to map my way around the car, figure out how I want to do things, develop some technique. And one of the things that was also a learning curve was how much paint do you need to mix up. So I was leaning more on the cautious end and decided to mix up less paint than I needed, because just being the primer, well, if I do get a bit of dry spray or something, I'm going to sand it back anyway. It's not a big deal. So I was only mixing small amounts up and just taking a mental note of how much I'm going to need when it comes time to actually spray the car with the base coat and the clear coat. So yeah, as you can see here, I run out of paint, and yeah, just got to go and stop what I'm doing and go and mix them up. But like I said, because it's just the primer, it's not that big of a deal. So mix some more up and then get back in there. So what I'll do here is I'll probably stop talking just so that you guys can enjoy a little bit of the raw footage here. You can hear the spray gun in action. But if you don't want to watch the raw footage, you can skip through to minute 14:50 where I get back to talking. Okay, I've just laid a coat of high build primer down and I thought I'd just give you guys a quick look at it before I start sanding it. I'll start sanding it tomorrow, but I'm pretty happy with how it went on. The roof isn't real even because I was doing like 50-50 overlaps. You can sort of see a bit of dry spray in it. It's not too bad. I'm going to sand it anyway, so I'm not too worried. The texture in the primer that I got is only a very fine texture, like it's fine for a high build primer anyway. So it's going to make a lot less work for me. And I'm pretty happy that the only runs I got was like a little run here. You can barely even see it. See that there in the light? I've got another one up here somewhere. Here it is. And I believe that is due to the gun I'm using. It's a GTI Pro Light, but I've got a PRI air cap on it. So it's like the primer gun. And it just makes you look like a better painter than you really are. I used to use a cheaper gun, and I always used to get runs all the time and horrible textures. So I really think a professional grade gun makes you look like you're a lot better painter than you really are. So I'm going to have to start sanding it now and get it ready for clear over base. But I'm stoked. Making progress. Alright, so that'll be it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. And be sure to like, comment and subscribe, because you don't want to miss part 5, where I smash out the prep work and I get the car back in the booth ready for some clear over base, and we get to see the car transform right before our eyes. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.